So, as you guys know, as I mentioned, we know from the intro, what I do is I own a boutique tutoring studio. I'm the author of Math Hacks, and I have this podcast, Math Therapy. So, just very briefly, we're here to talk about really 5 things that any math teacher or parent can do to help their child feel great about math. And the reason it's so important when we talk about inclusivity and we talk about accessibility is I really believe that we have done ourselves a disservice by painting math as a subject that only certain people are privy to. And just quickly, my story is that, when I was in high school, I failed grade 11 math twice. And I was always the type of kid who was very into art and I was super into drama and I wanted to be a rock star. And I was really made to feel when I was doing poorly at math, I went to an academic school and most of my teachers said to me, yeah, you're not a math person. And we really have an idea of what it means to be a math person, right? We hear stuff like that all the time. Oh, I'm more left brain. I'm more right brain. I'm more of a math person. I'm more of a creative person. And it's this social construct we've invented that is largely perpetuated by media stereotypes. Like, for example, have any of you seen a movie where like the cheerleader is good at math? I can't even think of one. Like, there's always the character, right? Like the cheerleader is unintelligent. Her smart friend is good at math, but her smart friend needs a makeover to get the guy. Like, it's gross, So and the same happens with gender. It happens with race. It happens with ability. Like, we see very, most media representations of mathematicians are white males, and they're not just white males. They're like white antisocial males. So like, like you think about A Beautiful Mind or like a Good Will Hunting, you think about the way mathematicians are portrayed in the media and throughout history. That identity is not accessible to most of the kids that we teach. So what I really want to talk about today is how we can, without even talking about math, how any teacher, any adult, any parent can actually help a child realize that they are capable of wearing that mathematician hat. And that's what this is really about. So it's funny, like, Robert, you deal with kids who are actually probably labeled mathematicians, right? They are probably told that they're already good at math. And that itself, I think, can be a tough hat to wear because often we tell those kids that means they have to be a certain way. And they might feel like they need to sacrifice parts of their identity. So like, I say in my intro that I'm in a rock band. And the reason I say that's relevant is every time I get off stage, it's 2020 now. Every time I get off stage and somebody asks me what I do in real life, and in real life means like to make money because you don't make money as a musician. I say, oh, I'm a math teacher. And every time you can imagine what the response is, it's, you don't look like a math teacher. Or like, what? Like, I can't imagine you being a math teacher. And it just goes to show that like, I've always had to struggle with this identity of being like a rock star on stage and being a math teacher and how everyone thinks that that's weird. And that makes me two different people. And as an adult, like I'm fine with being like, that's nonsense. Like these are social constructs. But for a young person, that's really, really hard to do. Right? We usually think of ourselves as one thing. We're trying to form our identities as kids and as adolescents. And it can be really, really hard to feel like math and your identity are clashing and you feel like you have to pick just one. So we're going to talk today about 5 things you can do as somebody in a classroom or someone who deals with kids or somebody who like walks around in society to help change the culture around math. So just starting with why we're scared of math and why math is the topic we're talking about. I always say this, I don't care if like everyone goes into STEM or everyone doesn't. What I care about is math is usually the first point in a child's life when they are taught there's something they can't do. They're taught that they're either this kind of person or they're not. So as an educator in math or as a parent or, this is such a good opportunity to show kids what they're really capable of. And I say this, I failed grade 11 math twice. And in grade 12, when I had a totally different teacher and I got a 99 in math, it's not like I became like, I don't work for NASA, but I actually started a rock band because I thought, oh my God, if I can do math, this thing I've been taught I cannot do, I can do anything. So it really changed the entire way I saw myself as a human being. And we as math educators have this like such an exciting opportunity in front of us that we can do this with our students. So, we talk about math anxiety a lot. And, the only thing I really even want to talk about here is the fact that there's a term for it. It's called math anxiety. We don't have we don't have history anxiety. That's not like a diagnosable term, but math affects so many people in an adverse way. And I think we have to recognize that. So even if we deal with more, like mathematically excited populations, I think we have an awareness that a lot of our friends have math anxiety. When you say the word math, you get a from a lot of people that you don't get when you mention other subjects. So it's important to just pay attention to the fact that even if we don't feel that way, that is a thing. It's a very popular thing, and we have a problem that we need to address. So just a little quick, I really do want to talk about nature versus nurture. I deal with the media a lot, and it like literally drives me insane how many times a reporter will say to me, "So is there a math gene?" Like as though this is something that is still a topic for debate. We have, the scientific community has proven over and over again that there is no genetic math gene. But we are very, very bent on hanging on to nature as a reason for things. And I want to give a little nod to nature and say, of course, we are all born with certain things and traits and whatever, but the role of those traits are so minor compared to, I mean, not in every circumstance, but we put too much weight on them. There is so much we can do with nurture. And when you look at, someone like Malcolm Gladwell, who's written about the 10,000 hours, or, Angela Duckworth, who talks about it in her book, Grit, we know that hard work and practice can often outweigh genetics. And the real point is it does nobody a service to focus on nature. So saying things like, oh, well, you know what, like this student has a natural talent, it doesn't help anyone, right? Like the student nor you can do anything about the natural talent or the natural gift. What you can do something about is nurture. You can do something about the context in which any student learns math, your classroom, your house, the environmental factors you do have control over. You don't have any control over what's happening in there, right? So I really want to encourage everyone watching to stop playing so much of an emphasis on it. And we'll talk about this later, how we can stop doing that. But don't worry about it. If you can't control it, you don't need to worry about it. And focusing on it gives the student and you a sense that you cannot control so much of what you actually can. So we're going to talk about the five most valuable things you can teach your students or your kids when it comes to math. And these skills are obviously applicable beyond way more than math. And they're quite generalizable, but these 5 skills are things that I find that many underserved populations do not get when we're talking about math. And I mean, generally, I don't think kids see this stuff in math class enough, or see this stuff when we're talking about math. We often think about self-esteem and confidence and growth mindset as being over here, but we teach math over here. And until we start merging the two and realizing that one is so integral to the other, we're going to keep seeing the same kind of kids who identify as being math people. And that's not what we want. We want to broaden that spectrum, right? Like we want every kid to see themselves as capable at math. And that's what this is about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is growth mindset. And I know growth mindset is kind of a thing that's been going around a lot lately, but let's just talk about how it pertains here. So this is my nod to Keanu Reeves and The Matrix. So I actually had a friend tell me about this. He did a study with an organization, and what the study was is they dealt with kindergarten kids, and they had a whole group of kids, and they would ask them, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And these kids would give answers like, "Well, a teacher, or maybe a doctor, or maybe a lawyer." And then they would say, "Okay, imagine I gave you this super secret pill, and once you took the pill, you could be anything you wanted to be." And the whole demeanor of these kids would change. Their eyes would light up and they'd be like, "Oh my God, like I'd be an astronaut, or I'd be the prime minister." And they would get so excited. And the crazy part is he would say, "I just asked you the same question," right? Like But these kids thought they needed this super special pill in order to do whatever they wanted, in order to dream big. And we really do that to kids at a very young age. We tell them to be safe, right? We tell them, you're born with this natural gift. Why don't you just stay in your lane? Right? Like being an astronaut is a legitimate job. Like why do kids think they need a special pill to become an astronaut? Right? But we often really do this, right? When kids are young, we start restricting them and restricting their dreams. And again, like when we think about diverse populations, this does really happen a lot more to kids who have been traditionally told that they need to be safe, that they're supposed to be a certain way, that they only have a set amount of skills, or that don't see themselves represented. So like, you think about even thinking about young girls who don't see them represented in fields like space engineering, or in like, there are very few female astronauts. There are some dope ones though, but it doesn't necessarily occur to them that like, I can do that too. And without us in the classroom or as parents saying, of course you can, why couldn't you? This continues to happen. So I really like this chart of like, we often do this to kids. You focus, this is what kids kind of think. If you can do something, that makes you feel good. So they want to do it, and then they do it. What happens when you do something over and over again? You get good at it, right? So again, it reestablishes that you can do that thing and you want to do it. But what we need to be teaching kids is you can start anywhere in the cycle. And I often find this, I've always been the type of person who like, I want to do something, so I just do it. So like, I really wanted to be in a rock band and I did it. I wanted to do it. I started there. I did it. I wasn't great at it, but I didn't like die. So I was like, all right, I can do it. So that made me want to do it. The first time I played a show and got like one person applauding, I was like, all right, there's something to this. And I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And obviously you get better and better at it. But kids learn. I read this in Angela Duckworth's book. It's so interesting. When babies are born, they're messing up all the time, right? Like they're literally like doing all sorts of crap. They don't care what a parent thinks. But kids start learning as they get older that if you make a mistake or if you can't do something, you get a frown, right? Your teacher or your parents scold you. They don't like it. You don't get that same very excited reaction as when you do something properly. So kids start just leaning towards what they can do. They don't want to take those risks to make mistakes because the adult in the room normally frowns at them. So something as simple as that can really change the way you react to students or to your kids, right? Like when they make those mistakes, remember, your 5-year-old is going to be able to tell if you're not thrilled with the fact that they dumped their alphabet soup on the ground, and they're going to start getting scared, thinking when I do that, I get a really negative response. I shouldn't drop things. That might be good in that situation. You probably want them to think that, but you don't want them to think that with their math homework, right? Or like with solving a problem. So, just quick things about fixed mindset. A fixed mindset approach is that approach, and I'm sure we all have students like this or people in our lives where you think you're born with it, you have it, and that's all it is. You know what? Like, how many people in your life do you know that are just like, oh, I'm just not the type of person who can read maps. Oh no, I'm just a clumsy person. I've always been a clumsy person. There's no way I can ever change that. Oh, I'm just not the type of right? We hear that all the time. That's a fixed mindset. If you get it wrong, if you're not good at it, you're probably never going to be good at it. There's no point in trying. Stay in your lane. A growth mindset is different. A growth mindset is sort of like, you know what? We're born with malleable skills. We can train ourselves. Things that are challenging and making mistakes are fun because I learn from them. My only goal is not just to be perfect, it's to have fun along the way. And I'll tell you a quick story about my band. So as you guys know, I've always wanted to be a rock star, and I failed a lot. I got kicked out of choir. I was in band and we played the Kiwanis Festival, which is like a big festival, and I dropped the hammer for the chimes I was playing. Didn't go well, made a lot of noise. I tried out for Canadian Idol. I waited 8 hours in line and for a 3-minute interview in which I did not make it past. So anyways, I stuck with it. I was like, I want to be in this band. And finally, after, as I told you guys, after I did well in math and I felt like I could do anything, I finally joined a band. And after our first show, this man came up to me. We played this bar. There were like 100 of our friends came. It was so awesome. And this guy came up to me and he said, I just wanted to tell you, you are the worst singer I've ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, oh my, like, I don't even know. Like, I can't remember how I felt. I just remember thinking, oh, like I'd had a great time. And I was like, oh my God, like, and I just remember thinking, I have two options here. I can either listen to this man and just like give up, or I can take singing lessons. And that's what I did. I took singing lessons. And 8 hours, 8 hours, not 8 hours, 8 years later in 2018, my band opened for Bon Jovi at the Air Canada Center. So I would love to see that man and to say thanks, because I'm glad he told me I sucked. Like it really made me try harder, and it made me be like, you know what? I'm having fun. I'm in this band. I want to, like, so again, we're not super famous or anything, but like that's pretty awesome. And that wouldn't have happened to me if I had had a fixed mindset and I had thought, you know what? This guy says I suck. That's all I've got, and that's all I'll ever be. So encouraging kids. Oh, there, that's a picture to prove it in case you guys thought I was lying. That's us opening for Bon Jovi in front of 10,000 people. No one told me I sucked after that. So that's good. So that's tip number one, is foster that growth mindset. Really see the students you have and the people in your lives as malleable. And I often say to kids, like, you can choose not to practice. If you want to say, you know what, I'm bad at math and I have no motivation to go forwards and I don't care, that's fine. But don't not do it because you believe you can't do it. Right? Like, don't say to me, because to me, it's really about choice. If you want to make a choice to not do something, that's fine. But don't make the choice because you are convinced that you're not capable. And that, as a math teacher, is your greatest skill. That is teaching somebody that they're capable of anything in the world, including like factoring polynomials. That's the skill. It's not the math. It's the empowerment you bring into the room when you show a kid that they're actually capable of something they thought they couldn't. So growth mindset is number one. Number two is redefining success. And we were talking about this earlier with the marks, right? Like, Robert, you were talking about how in your group you focus a lot on not the right answer, but on the process. And I really, really love that. Math class gets a really bad reputation because in school, often kids are taught that what being good at math means is being quick at math, right? The kid who can do the quickest mental calculation or getting the right answer. Those are very, I'm going to make a math pun, but those are very linear ways of looking at being good at math. And, when you think about it, the best mathematicians, those who came up with the crazy theorems and whatever, it took them forever. They were not quick. It took them forever to solve problems. They made a bajillion mistakes. I know that's not a number. I'm sorry. They made many, many mistakes along the way. So it's so odd to me that we have like created a society where mathematical proficiency is equated to getting the right answer, to not making mistakes, and to being fast, when the famous mathematicians did none of that. But we don't talk about it. So like, again, like what you're doing, Robert, right? We're focusing on who can come up with a crazy way to solve this problem that no one's thought of. That's success. Who can make a mistake and not have a meltdown and then try again a different way? That's success in math class, right? Who can get a 52 today when they got a 51 yesterday? That's success. So we really need to redefine what it means to be successful at math. And again, this goes beyond the classroom, right? Because having a kid who sees themselves as bad at math all of a sudden be really proud of themselves for solving a problem they couldn't solve yesterday, and on the 10th time getting it right and feeling that sense of accomplishment, that skill is going to get them way farther in life than being able to solve it right the first time. Like, who cares? I mean, that's great, but like, that's not even as exciting or as important or as predictive of future success, right? Like, we want kids who are resilient, who don't give up, and who keep on trying. So again, emphasizing that stuff in math class will really help. And again, like, we're talking about inclusion. So we're talking about showing those students who don't fit the traditional mold of what it means to be good at math. We're talking about inspiring them to see themselves as good at math in a different way. Not just so they can write math contests and pursue STEM, but so that they can see themselves as breaking a barrier that has stood there for them forever, right? Like, we want to see them as being like, all right, you know what? I am good at this thing that my entire family never thought I could be good at, or no one in my family has ever been good at. I am good at this. now I'm going to pursue this path or another path, but I'm going to do it with confidence. I'm going to, I'm not, it's a very different feeling. And that's the feeling we have the capacity to bring to these students. So just a couple of things you can even do is rewarding hard work and perseverance. So we were talking about homework before, like that's great if you get your homework questions right. But what's more important is if you consistently did your homework every single day this week and you did it and you checked that off your list and you did it when you didn't want to. That to me is success, because you can give up when you don't want to do things. How cool is it that you were like, I really don't want to do this, but I felt like I had to do it and you did it anyway. That is success. Tell stories about times you failed so your students or your kids know that it's okay to fail and make mistakes, right? And celebrate failures for what they've learned. I actually, at my math tutoring studio, I have like a whole wall of failure certificates. And when a student fails something, I make them a certificate, like a diploma, and we write what it was that they failed and the lesson they learned, and we stick it up on the wall and we celebrate it just like we would celebrate a good mark. Because like if you fail an entire test because you forgot BEDMAS, that's amazing. Let's take note of that so that you don't do it again. You've learned that BEDMAS actually really matters. That's cool. So like not shaming kids for failing, but being like, often we learn much more important lessons from failure than we do from success. And you guys know this, right? Like you could have a kid actually get 100% on a test and not know what they're doing, right? Like they could just like follow some formula and be like, I'm just going to use this formula every time. I have no idea why I'm doing it, but like seems to work. And they're actually not that good at math. They're good at memorizing something. So like we need to reestablish what it is we're trying to do when we're talking about being capable at math and being excited about math and problem solving. So number 3 is teaching kids the value of hard work. I honestly, like, I'm going to say this as someone who owns a company. The number of people I interview and hire and have to unhire because they just have no work ethic is huge. And you hear this all the time, right? Like I hear this from my students. Often it's not that they're bad at math. They're scared of the work, right? They're like, oh, like this is hard. And again, I'm referencing to Angela Duckworth because I just read her book and like you have to read it if you guys haven't. It's so good. She talks about how they've like really done a lot of work on teaching their 2 children that something like challenges are something to look for and to seek out. And she talks about how her daughter did her first swim race and like came out of the pool and she was like, how was the swim race? And the daughter was like grinning from ear to ear. And her response was, it was so hard, as like a synonym for it was so fun. Like it was like, they were so excited about doing something so hard and doing it. And like, oh, I think we are, again, like doing our kids a real disservice these days by discouraging hard work almost. Like as soon as things get hard, we tell them to do something else instead, right? So like, and a lot of this is just our society. We're so obsessed with instant gratification. Like obviously I'm not going to go on and on about social media, but like we all know it's a problem, right? Like we're so obsessed with just like, I want an instant result. And if I don't get it, I'm just going to do something else. I'm only going to watch this video for 3 seconds and then I'm bored. Like we need to remind kids how that hard work in itself is rewarding despite the outcome. Like to work really, really hard on something. Like I just think about all the things, like I got rejected every day from stuff. Like I'm constantly like applying for grants and applying for awards and like submitting, like emailing like Kim Kardashian and asking her to interview me for her podcast. Like I'm just doing weird stuff. And I put a lot of time into it. And when I write a really, really good email or like do my research and really put in a great award application, I'm proud of myself regardless of the result. In fact, I know the result is that I will likely not get it. But in itself, the hard work I put in is almost the result, right? Like the outcome is like secondary. Like you think about the Raptors. I feel like the Raptors actually taught kids a lot about hard work, over the past year, because it was great that they won, but like the Raptors themselves kept being like, this is after decades of losing. Like decades and decades of losing. And we had fun at every single game we played and all of the hard work we put in to finally get into this point. Like just because we won, like that's great. But we were celebrating every single season, regardless of a win. And like, I think we need to bring that back, right? Like after, when you're doing a proof or something and you do this crazy proof and you do 3 pages and at the end you're like, I didn't prove that left side equals right side. like I didn't do. And you have to go back and start all over again. But like, how cool is it that you just came up with 3 pages of stuff, right? And now you know that you're going to try a different route. Like, that is success in a way, right? That hard work teaches you how to proceed the next time. So like, again, like, things to do, like the ways you can do that with your kids is every single adult works hard, right? So demonstrating that hard work can be rewarding. Instead of complaining about the hard work you're doing, like, reframing it. Like, when you talk about working hard around the house or like at your job, like, frame it in a way that you're like, I worked really hard and I feel awesome. I'm going to celebrate that. Like, I'm taking tonight to like make an awesome dinner and celebrate how hard I worked today. That's all I'm celebrating. And start changing the language. And like, language is a big one that we're going to talk about even more, but we often congratulate students for saying things like easy, like, oh yeah, it was so easy. And you're like, well, great, you must be so smart then. We have to back off on it a little because, like, again, being good at math does not mean, when we go back, we're going back to nature and nurture, right? Like, cool if you were born with like some natural aptitude for one math, like, we can get into a debate about how much that's a thing, but we're not going to do that right now. But like, cool if something was easy for you, but that doesn't take much effort and there's not much to reward there. Now, I mean, something might be easy because somebody worked very, very hard in the past and now the thing is easy. So I don't want to go too far with it, but I just want to point out that ease isn't always the goal, and like, complementing ease needs to be balanced by also complementing hard work. And I deal with a lot of parents who will call me and say things. I had a parent call me last week and she said, I'm looking for a tutor for my daughter. And I was like, okay, tell me about your daughter. And she goes, I have 2 kids. My son he's just so naturally good at math. It comes so easy to him. I mean, he gets 70s, but he doesn't put any work into it. My daughter, she's getting a 92, but she has to work so hard for it. And I was like, what is this conversation? So like, it was so warped, right? Like, in her mind, her daughter struggled. Even though her daughter was getting a higher mark, her daughter was the one who needed a tutor because she had to work hard at getting her higher mark. Whereas her son, who was getting a 70, did not need a tutor because it was easy for him. And I thought, that's messed up. but I don't think it's unusual. I see this all the time, right? Where we really we don't reward hard work. We reward the fact that something comes easy, and we encourage kids to get to that point. And I don't think that needs to be the focus. So speaking of language, so number 4, our second last tip is really about language. And I'm not just talking about swearing and about dropping F-bombs. I'm talking about saying things that are, and again, like, if you're in a math class, if you're a teacher and watching this, or if you're in a household with siblings, words like stupid, idiot, like disabling words, don't just, get upset when one calls the other that. But I have so many students who will just be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. How did I make that mistake? Like, go on. As it's just such a natural part of their negative self-talk. And really watching how the people in your life talk to themselves, like the language they use, right? Like, point it out. Be like, you're not stupid for making a mistake. Like, some people really need people to point that out for them, right? Because we are so used to talking to ourselves that way. And I mean, I've seen many classrooms where students talk to one another that way. And that's even worse, because how shameful and embarrassing is that? So that's the first thing. Correct your kids' language or your students' language when they're talking about themselves. And I'd like to really broaden it to when people say categorizing things. I'm not the person, oh, I've never been good at algebra. I've never been good at anything involving spatial this. Like, really, that's where growth mindset comes in, to say, well, just because you haven't been good at it in the past doesn't mean you can't be good at it now. Maybe you have to work a little harder at it, but like, who cares, right? So work a little harder at it. I can help you with that. And like, if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, please never say the word math person again. Like, just never say that term. And when someone in your life says it, please say, did you know that's actually just like a totally made up thing? Like, there's no such thing as math people. It's just made up. We literally made it up, So, and we make it up, and it limits us and it categorizes us. If I consider myself a math person, by definition, I don't consider myself a creative person. If I don't consider myself a math person, by definition, I don't think I can like balance my, bank account, or like problem solve or read a map. So no matter which way you use the term, it is limiting. You're a person who perhaps likes math or perhaps doesn't. That doesn't make you a math person or a not math person. This is like my big thing that I'm like obsessed with. So I just encourage you to do that and to see how it really changes people's tones and the way they define themselves. I find that often, you know, my tutoring studio, I didn't like talk much about it because we're virtual now, so it makes me sad. But part of the whole idea of the studio is it's a very different space. Like, it's like, you know, you come in and like there's candles and incense and we drink tea lattes and do math and like everything's pink. And the whole vibe of it is like to show students that they don't have to walk in and take off their, you know, whoever they are hat and put on a math hat to do math. They can be themselves, whoever they are. They may be a musician, an athlete, a engineer, whatever, and they can do math. It's just another part of our identity. It is not an identity. And it's interesting to watch kids open up once you really explain that to them. Once you talk to them about the media and say, look, don't you think it's weird that like we've never seen certain types of people be good at math? Like, that can't be the, like, do you really think there's not a single cheerleader on the planet that's good at math? I know like 10. So like, why don't we ever see that? And how does that affect the way we see ourselves? So like, language is a really big one. And I really like, especially when thinking about inclusivity, it's really, really important. Like, you know, I've talked to groups of teachers where sexist language is just, that happens. Like, you know, maybe like something will happen in math class and a girl will get a problem wrong and someone will be like, it's because you're a girl, and they'll all laugh and it's a joke. So no one says anything. But microaggressions like that are how stereotypes perpetuate. And there's been so much work about stereotype threat and about populations who feel like, just a quick example, because stereotype threat is not a popular term that many people know. So stereotype threat is the idea that, for example, if a guy gets a math problem wrong, you're likely going to say he's not good at math. Whereas if a girl gets a math problem wrong, you'll say, see, girls aren't good at math, right? And what happens is we know, like, so I'm just going to speak for women because I am one. And this is what my master's thesis was about. It was about gender. And I did a lot of work around this, that most girls have internalized that stereotype. We know it. We know that girls are supposed to be worse at math than guys. And you can say, oh, that stereotype has been eradicated, but it is not. And literally 2 weeks ago, I did a radio interview where the guy said to me, have you seen that article that came out? And I said, what article? And he was like, there was an article that came out and they did brain scans of kids and they found that there was no difference in math ability in boys and girls. And I was like, it is 2020. We do not need to prove this over and over again. And then he said, yeah, I wonder what happens after puberty though. And I was like, oh my God. And this was like on the radio, like in Ontario. Like I was like, I'm going to lose it. Anyways, the point is these stereotypes exist. We've internalized it. And many groups, many marginalized groups have internalized stereotypes about themselves. They know what they are and they are terrified of proving those stereotypes correct. So keep an eye out when you have a student that, you know, has been totally like discriminated against in the math community. That's likely how they're feeling. They're likely thinking, I don't want to mess this up for my entire group of people. And there's a lot more pressure and stress on them, right? So it's just something to be cognizant of, that those oppressive stereotypes are internalized and play out in ways that we're not necessarily conscious of. So that's why I'm like such a stickler about language. It's just, don't let that stuff fly, right? And point it out when it happens. And the last tip is believing. And, you know, believing is a really interesting one. I always think about, you know, as a parent or like whatever, even if you're not a parent, you get the idea of like when a kid learns to walk. What is a parent's demeanor when a kid is learning to walk? You know, the kid falls down how many times? Like hundreds of times. And the entire time the parent is like a supportive coach, cheering them on, you know, like picking them up when they fall down. Do you think at any point the parent's like, you know what? I just don't think Sarah's a walker. I don't think she's going to be a walker. She's probably not the type of kid who's ever going to walk. I'm just going to give up on her. No, right? That never happens. But with math, we are so quick to be like, you know, I just don't think math is her thing. Like, let's give her something else to do. She probably can't do math. It's such a weird thing, right? Like With walking, you go into it assuming that most likely your kid will learn how to walk, right? And you treat them that way, and that kid knows that you think that. I mean, there's obviously extenuating circumstances, but for the most part, that's how you're treating it. Or a kid tying their shoelaces. You don't think at some part in the process, you know what, let's just do Velcro for life, because they're probably never going to master this. And, let's not even bother. No, right? And kids can really sense that. With math, we really need to go into it that way, believing that every kid can do math. Like it might take some kids longer, it might take a different approach, but kids feeling that from you, like, you always hear this about teachers. The teachers that really make a difference are those where the kid is like, I don't know, my teacher never gave up on me, right? They believed in me. Like, even if the kid didn't graduate top of their class, they're like, I wouldn't have passed if it wasn't for that teacher. And that's enough for them to be like, I tried so much harder because I knew that the adult in the room actually believed I could do it, even when I didn't believe in myself. So that's one thing I would really emphasize above all else is show those kids that even if they come from a place or a household where no one believes in them, or they come from a culture where no one believes in them, or whatever it is, that like you see no reason why they shouldn't be capable of math. And that's how obvious it is to you. So those are the 5 major tips, starting with a growth mindset, redefining what success means in math, teaching kids the value of hard work and how that can be fulfilling in and of itself, being very cognizant of our language, and above all, just really believing in every single person that you encounter on your mathematical journey. And that leads us to placing kids in this bottom circle, right? And showing them that they can start anywhere in the circle and that they have a fighting chance. And that is my presentation.